Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, we shall be studying about spectral mapping theorem. So let us see first of all what is the statement for this theorem which is stated for polynomials. So for this, if we assume X to be a complex Banach space, so that means we are saying it is a normed space which is complete in itself, and T is some linear operator which is also bounded and is defined on this complex Banach space. Then they are saying P lambda, if P lambda represents a polynomial in lambda which is defined as a n lambda to the power n plus a n minus 1 lambda to the power n minus 1 plus up to a naught, then the spectrum of the polynomial of the operator T, that would be equal to the polynomial of the spectrum of T. So that means if you input the complex numbers here into this polynomials, the resulting polynomial, those complex numbers are obviously the spectral values. So that a polynomial would be equivalent to calculating the spectral values of the polynomial for T. So this is the theorem. In other words, how can we define this polynomial for T? The polynomial for operator T would be defined in this manner: a n t to the power n plus a n minus 1 t to the power n minus 1 plus up to so on a naught I, where I is the identity operator. So it consists of all the values. So what is the spectrum of this polynomial P of T? So it consists of all the values which the polynomial P assumes on the spectrum sigma T of T. So basically we are saying this spectrum is nothing but P of sigma of T. So this is the statement. So let's move on to the proof of this theorem. So here we will assume two cases. When n is 0, that means the degree of this polynomial is equal to 0. That means we are having just a constant polynomial. So in operator form, your polynomial would just be a naught into I, where I is the identity operator. So what could be the spectral values for this constant polynomial? They would also be constant numbers, right? So the spectrum of this polynomial P of T is again a naught, and when you input the spectral values of this operator T into this polynomial, you will again get the constant number a. So in this case, when n is equal to 0, we have the result with us. So for the next case, let us assume n is not equal to 0. That means we assume n is greater than 0. So in this case, we shall prove the result. We shall prove this equality given in the theorem by proving two parts. First is the inclusion sigma of P of T is contained in P sigma T, and otherwise in the second part we'll prove the reverse. That means P of sigma T is contained in sigma of P of T. So this is what we wanted to prove here. So let's proceed with this part. So for this we assume some member here in the first part, and we shall prove that it is also lying in this second part. This is what is our goal here. So for that, we consider a polynomial in T, which is P of T, and let's name this polynomial to be S. So corresponding to this polynomial, we can define S mu, where mu is some complex number, such that it is represented by S minus mu into I. So what was your S? It was P of T. So therefore we can write this to be P of T minus mu I. This is S mu. So now we have the case where we say if S mu inverse exists, then S mu inverse, that would correspond to the resolvent operator for the polynomial P of T. If this exists, then this is the resolvent operator. So this is another assumption that we are making over here. So suppose we keep this complex number mu as fixed. So let's see what happens next. Now given X is complex, so therefore this polynomial S mu lambda, which is P lambda minus mu, must completely factor into linear terms. Now what is this S mu lambda? How do you get that? You have S mu as this P of t minus mu lambda. So corresponding to this S mu, we can now define a polynomial S mu lambda, where instead of t we can write P lambda minus mu. And identity, no need to write identity here because these are numbers, and we can simply write them. So now for this polynomial, we say this polynomial should factor completely in linear terms because x is complex, and we know the space of complex numbers that is complete in itself. So that means no closure exists for that space. That means all the polynomials in this complex number space, they factor completely into linear terms. That is a result that we already knew from algebra and field theory. So using that result, our polynomial S mu lambda, which is nothing but P lambda minus mu, could now be written into these linear factors, where what are these gamma 1, gamma 2 up to gamma n? They are the zeros of this polynomial S mu, and these further depend upon mu by the choice of mu. If you change this mu, you will get another roots here. That is quite obvious. And what is this an here? This an is the leading coefficient for the given polynomial. Okay. So now we say that corresponding to this equation 1 here, we can write the operator equation as well. So this was S mu lambda. So corresponding to this, was your S of mu would be P of t minus mu into I, where I is the identity operator. So this polynomial would now, you just have to replace these lambdas with the corresponding operator t, so that you would have an as such. Then instead of lambda minus gamma I, you have t minus gamma I, gamma 1 I, right? Instead of this factor lambda minus gamma 2, you now have t minus gamma 2 into I, and moving like this, you have a polynomial in the operator t. Now we say that if each of these lambda j's is in the resolvent set for the operator t, then t minus gamma ji has a bounded inverse, which is defined on all of x. Now why is this so? Because we are assuming the elements that are being taken from this resolvent set, and for a resolvent set, the resolvent operator is bounded, exists, and it is defined for all of the elements x. Therefore we say each gamma j, for each gamma j, this factor has a bounded inverse defined on all of x. In fact, what would be the inverse of this S mu? So the inverse for this S mu would be taking the inverse of this factor. So how do you take the inverse? Now here an is being the leading coefficient is now converted to, if you take the inverse, as 1 by an, and moreover for different polynomials of this kind, if you have a b inverse, so you could write this to be b inverse a inverse. So using this property here, we can write t minus gamma n I inverse up to t minus gamma 2 I inverse t minus gamma 1 I inverse. So hence we can say that this mu also belongs to the resolvent set for the polynomial p of t. Why this is so? Because we have considered here the polynomial for p of t, for the operator t. If this belongs to the resolvent set of p of t, that means so we saw that when S mu inverse exists, this was our condition. This is the assumption that we had considered. If S mu inverse exists, in that case, because we are able to define an inverse operator corresponding to this S mu lambda, which is defined like this here. So corresponding to this, mu will obviously belong to the resolvent set for the operator P of t. Why P of t? Because by the definition of S of mu, you can see here that it is P of t minus lambda I. So that means this is a resolvent operator corresponding to operator polynomial P of t. So therefore this is the case. Otherwise, if we do not have this condition that S mu inverse exists, then mu will belong to sigma of P of t. So if this belongs to sigma of P of t, that means gamma j will belong to sigma of t for some j, right? Gamma j will belong to sigma of P of t for some j, being the complement. So if this is the case, if gamma j belong to the spectrum of t, so now we can also see that from the equation number 1, if you substitute in place of gamma the value in place of lambda the value gamma j, suppose we input gamma 1 here, so we will have S mu gamma 1, so that would be P gamma 1 minus mu, so that would be an into gamma 1 minus gamma 1, gamma 1 minus gamma 2 up to gamma 1 minus gamma n. So you see the first factor here is 0, so here we have 0. And if we substitute gamma 2 here, so that means we will have S mu into gamma 2, so that would be P of gamma 2 minus mu, so that would be an gamma 2 minus gamma 1, gamma 2 minus gamma 2 up to gamma 2 minus gamma n. So therefore we here have again 0. So if we substitute gamma j for j varying from 1 to n, we see that every time we obtain a 0 because a factor is present here. A linear factor is present here. So therefore we say that S mu of gamma j, which is defined by P of gamma j minus mu, that is 0. And using this thing over here, we can say that P of gamma j is nothing but mu. So mu is equal to P of gamma j, and this gamma j that is coming from the spectrum set of t. So we can say this mu is belonging to P of sigma of t. So remember we started with mu belonging to sigma of P of t. So this implies that from here, because we started from mu belonging to sigma of P of t and we have reached that it also belongs to P of sigma of t, therefore we have the inclusion, and this proves our first part. For the second part, we wanted to prove P of sigma of t is contained in sigma of P of t. So again what we will do, we will consider an element here in the first part and we will show that this also belongs to the second part. So that means we assume here kappa, some element in P of sigma of t. So we will prove this kappa to be equal to sigma of P of t. So for that we assume that this kappa is belonging to this first set. So that means what would be that? It could be written as some polynomial of this kind, P of beta, where what is this beta? Beta is coming from sigma of t. So according to the definition for this set. Now we have two possibilities. Either for this beta, t minus beta I has no inverse, or it has an inverse. So let's discuss both of these cases one by one. So for the first part, we are assuming that t minus beta I has no inverse. So let's see what happens here. So our kappa, which was P of beta, so we can write P beta minus kappa is equal to 0, right? So, and moreover you can see that because we are having 0 and we have inputted the number beta over here, so that means beta would serve as a 0 for the polynomial. So corresponding to this, we can write a polynomial of this kind, P lambda minus kappa, such that when you input instead of lambda the value beta here, you get the 0. So we can denote this by S kappa of lambda, where lambda is the variable, kappa is a fixed number. By changing kappa, our polynomial changes here, right? So this polynomial is dependent on kappa. So now because we found beta to be a root of this polynomial, so therefore we can write sk lambda to be P lambda minus kappa. So we have one root for this polynomial, which is beta. So therefore lambda minus beta would be a factor. If this is a factor, we can write this to be lambda minus beta into some other polynomial g lambda, which is the remaining polynomial consisting of other n minus 1 linear factors and the leading coefficient. So corresponding to this polynomial sk lambda, we can now define the operator equation. So skt, which would be instead of p lambda minus kappa, we now have p of t minus kappa, and so it would be t minus beta into I. So instead of lambda we are writing t, and instead of b we are writing bi, because now we are talking about in the same polynomial in operator terms, right? So this equation 3 is an equivalent equation in operator form for this above equation sk lambda. So corresponding to this representation, we say that all the factors gt, they commute with t minus beta I here. So therefore we can write this to be t kappa, s kappa t, that would be gt into t minus beta I. Now here we are making another assumption that sk had an inverse. What would happen if sk had an inverse? So let's see what would happen if this sk had an inverse. That in that case we can write this polynomial, we can shift this sk t to this side, so that we have t minus beta into gt into sk inverse, right? And this would again be equal to sk inverse gt into t minus beta I. So now coupling these two terms together, we can see that this term commutes with t minus beta I here. So therefore from here we obtain inverse for t minus beta I. So using this expression. Now this part showing t minus beta I to having an inverse, this is a contradiction to our assumption, because in this case we have assumed t minus beta I has no inverse. So therefore our assumption that sk inverse exists, this is incorrect. So this assumption is not correct. If this is not correct, that means we say that for the present kappa, the resolvent sk inverse of pt does not exist. Why? Because sk do not have, s kappa do not have inverse, and this cancel out the, this does not satisfy the property for this resolvent vector for kappa. So this resolvent vector of kappa does not exist because the inverse itself does not exist. If it does not exist, that means kappa will not belong to the resolvent set, and instead it will belong to the spectrum set sigma of p of t. So we see here in this case we started from kappa belonging to p of sigma t, and we have now reached that kappa belongs to sigma of p of t in the first case. So therefore our assumption, our inclusion in this case has been proved, right? Because we are our selected kappa, that was arbitrary in nature. Now for the second part, where we are assuming t minus beta I to have an inverse, in this case we again suppose kappa to be some polynomial p of beta, where beta is coming from the spectrum set. So now we will show that this kappa will belong to the spectrum of p of t. So in this case we are assuming t minus beta I inverse exists. Now we are saying the range of t minus beta I is not equal to x. Why? Because using this result, it says that if this operator, inverse operator exists, so it would be bounded by the bounded inverse theorem. And when we apply the same thing to t minus beta I, so we will say that this beta will be, is belonging to the resolvent set of the operator t, and therefore this would contradict the fact that beta is belonging to the spectrum of t. So this cannot happen. If this cannot happen, that means R of using this condition that the range of t minus beta is not equal to x, and using the equation 3, the equation 3, it says that SKT is nothing but T minus beta Eg of T. So using these two conditions, we say that the range for Sk operator is also not equal to X. If this is not equal to X, so we can say that this kappa will not belong to the resolvent set, because the third property for resolvent vector is not satisfying here. So therefore kappa will belong to the spectrum set of P of T, because it is not belonging to the resolvent set of T. And hence we say that if that this thing I have already told you, that if it belonged to the resolvent set, that it would imply that its range would be equal to X, but this is not the case here. So therefore in this case kappa has to belong to sigma of P of T, hence this inclusion holds for this case. Now we have this thing and we have this thing, so both of these implies that these two sets are equal to each other. So this is the result that we wanted to prove over here in this theorem. Well, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching.